All right, hello everyone. My name is Eric Jones, and we are going to look at a lecture entitled "The Landscape Construction Process," and that's generally what it is. It is a process. It is step A, step B, step C to get to the final end of a project. When the homeowner walks into their newly built home or their newly built building, and they are happy that we did the work. So, let's take a look at this process. And towards the end, we'll talk a little bit about scheduling these projects, especially if you're working for like a large home builder or a larger general contractor, some of the ways that we may um, be scheduled into the project. So the objectives of the course. We're going to describe the steps of the construction process, all the way from pre-planning, site preparation, demolition, protection of existing structures, grading, utilities, site work, all that's going to be talked about. And then again, like I said, we're going to talk about the planning of these construction activities and where we, as landscape contractors or irrigation contractors, where we will fit in to the construction process. So to begin with, I'd like to mention a quote. It's from David Sauter. He is an author of a textbook that I use in several of my classes at the college I teach. But the process of landscaping should be efficient yet complementary to other projects in progress at a site. Well, a lot of times efficiency, guys, can take a back seat depending on the project that you're working on, the builder that you're working for, things like weather, materials being delivered. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong. And one of my biggest pet peeves on a construction site is at the very end, the builder is going absolutely berserk. He's running around, trying to get things done, screaming at everybody, and there's 50 subcontractors there. There's nowhere to park on the street. When you pull up at 7:30 in the morning, well, the electrician and the plumber that's trying to finish out the trim work inside the house got there at 7. They've taken up all this space. Well, you've got plants that need to come off your truck and trailer. You got irrigation pipe that needs to be taken to the house. You're having to park way down the street because you have other people living in the neighborhood. There's nowhere to park. One of my biggest pet peeves, stepping on toes of other subcontractors. Well, the flow chart. Let's first talk about this for the landscape work. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's talk about structural work. Now, they're going to do the building foundation, utilities, site construction, then they're going to do cleanup. Look at all of this flow chart for landscaping. We're going to do pre-construction activities. We're going to do site prep. We're going to do rough grading. It's going to include drainage and erosion control. We're going to do site utilities, our irrigation distribution line. We're going to do retaining walls. We're going to do paving. We're going to have to do footings and foundations for related site work, such as pergolas or any other type of freestanding landscape structure that may need it. Our site structures, which is that pergola I just talked about pouring the footings for. Finish grading, setting irrigation heads, doing freestanding walls or fencing, adding site amenities. And then last but not least, one of the last things we do on a landscape construction job is install our plant material and our turf. And then we're going to be responsible for cleanup. And hopefully it's just responsible for our cleanup. Hopefully that the painter's not there that's coming out dumping extra paint out into a newly mulched bed, but we've seen it. You've all been on these construction sites, and it really drives me crazy that people will come out and just start dumping their trash out into the yard, and then we are held responsible, or the builder's like, you need to clean that up. Well, there's paint in the mulch that you just put out. Exactly. Why not have your painter bring some extra mulch out? I'm only doing this job once, but time and time again, you see these guys doing that. So, some potential conflicts that we may look at on a job site. One is delays in material. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my experience with materials. I used to do a ton of the O'Reilly auto parts throughout the Southeast. I was working for my mom and dad. would do these landscape jobs and irrigation jobs for O'Reilly Auto Parts. Did them, like I said, all over the Southeast. So it took me once waiting on plants to get delivered before I got a little ticked off, because I'm like, wow, you know what? These plant materials are right here. I could be planting them. We could be leaving tomorrow instead of waiting for them to get there the next day. So what I started doing was, locating all plant material before we went there. If we were going into Georgia, I would locate a nursery close to the site, make sure they were capable of delivering the plant materials and that they had them. We were kind of lucky because there's really only 3 types of plants on the job. It would be maples, crepe myrtles, and dwarf Burford hollies, and we were pretty much able to find them anywhere we went. But as long as I had the quantity and the size that the designer spec'd, we were good to go. So always make sure you can get your materials there. I like getting them there, a day early. If we were still installing irrigation lines, I'd like to see that plant material truck show up, and we would secure it to the property or hide it somewhere. If we had to, put it in our enclosure trailer to protect it. But at least they were on site. I didn't have to go and pick them up. They were delivered. I was able to keep working with the guys and not be taken off going getting plant materials. Do not like delays in any type of materials that we need for the job. Another conflict, basically not when you're traveling, because you have a little more control of your employees when you're working out of town. But if you're doing a job here in the town that your business is located, a lot of the times you're going to have individuals like this right here that cannot get up and get to work on time. Well, a lot of the times, if you pay them on Friday and you're working on Saturdays, this is definitely what's going to happen. Heck, in this industry, though, this happens every single day. And the sad thing about it, this individual right here that's just woken up is probably one of the few employees that has a driver's license working for you. So you're standing there, the crew's ready to go. You're looking for the old sleepyhead here who's going to drive one of the trucks, because the 2 guys that did show up can't drive. They were like him a few months ago. They got paid and got caught staying out one night too late, and they've lost those driver's license. So again, one of these things that we just have to deal with. And whoa, look at it, it's raining. Well, let me tell you something. On a day like today that's raining, this, well, if I can get it, this young man, the day he shows up bright and early is when it's pouring down rain. You're going to be like, dude, where were you at yesterday? We had a great opportunity to show up early, get work done. We didn't have, shouldn't have to wait on you, or heck, you probably didn't even show up at all. But on a rainy day is when he's going to show up. He's going to be there 15 minutes early. Hey, boss, what you need me to do? I need to work, man. I missed yesterday when it was sunny. I need to get my hours in. Hey, sorry. You're just pack it up and going back home. But it also can put us delayed in getting our jobs done. And when we know that, I mean, it's, we work outside. It's what's going to happen. But can we convince the general contractor or home builder that, guys, it's rained for 3 or 4 days straight. I can't go out and start digging trenches for irrigation. I can't go sow a lawn. It's got to dry out. That's a part of the industry and part of the people that we work for. All right, some other potential conflicts. Just what I talked about. Hey, we show up at 7:30. Well, the guys trying to finish the hardwood flooring, the electrical guys there hanging lights, the plumbers and they're setting plumbing fixtures, and you're having to park a mile down the street and tote in 50, 7-gallon plants, 3-gallon plants. You're having to cart in your trees on a plant cart because you can't pull up to the yard. Again, we're stepping on each other's toes. If the builder had any type of scheduling software, could he not have used that? The larger builders do, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the lecture, but I hate stepping on each other's toes. Now, again, if you're working for the same builder, same GC, you can get to know these guys and be on a good working relationship with them. And that's what happened with us with O'Reilly's. We got to be good friends with the guy that did all the grading and he did all the concrete work. It was the same guy. He graded the lots and poured the concrete. Well, if he was getting ready to pour the concrete and we haven't, been called in, usually the superintendent would give us a day or two's notice. Well, sometimes hours notice. Can you be here tomorrow? The grading guy would call us and say, hey, we're pouring the concrete tomorrow. Do you want us to put in the sleeves for the irrigation system? Yeah, sure. Well, where do you want those sleeves? Well, we pull out the landscape plan, and we'll say, all right, we'll need the sleeves. Let's make them 20 feet, 25 feet off the the front entrance, from the street. So 25 feet up. He'd measure it. He'd lay us some pipe. Trench it in. We'd have a good sleeve to run our irrigation pipes through, and he'd pour the concrete. Now, other times we'd have to jump in the truck, and there's many times me and one guy would hop in the truck with sleeve pipe, drive to South Carolina, drive into Georgia, put in the sleeves, and then turn around and drive back that afternoon. That's if we weren't, for somehow or another. O'Reilly's did like to have 2 or 3 landscapers. They liked having 2 or 3 grading guys. Most of the time it was the same one. He would help us out. But if not, we didn't know the guys. They wouldn't even think to call us. And then, the superintendent, hey, they pouring the concrete tomorrow. You can come put your sleeves in. It's one of those things. Make sure you have that good working relationship with the other subs. Again, I've done many of these stores. Seen them too many times, but I did thoroughly enjoy it. I learned a lot and ran into a lot of difficult situations that we know now how to get around it and work our way through it. Sad thing about it, they do a nice building, and they do start out with a nice landscape, but it just seems like when the store manager took over, that the landscape kind of went down. And I don't know how many times, guys, we would put in an irrigation system that, full coverage, turf watered separately, drip irrigation in the beds. We did it right. The architect that did the site plan, he was a building architect. He wasn't a landscape architect. Good guy, good guy to work with and talk to. And he would let us design the irrigation system. We were always responsible for an as-built irrigation plan that we would submit to the store owner and to the building contractor. So we would do that. 9 times out of 10, we were finding out that as soon as the store manager took over, they would turn the irrigation system off because, their salary was based on profits, and if they used more water for irrigation, that was, less money in their checks. So it's one of those things. Our warranty period was over once the store manager got the keys. So I don't know. It doesn't make sense. But anyway, before work begins, we must have a project to start work on. And this is what we did. We would get a set of plans or blueprints from the GC. The GC was Creative Structures. They were out in Knoxville, Tennessee. We're based in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So we did a lot of mailing back of plans in the older days, and then we started where we would get emailed the CAD drawings that we could plot out, or we'd get them in a PDF that we could get printed out, and a lot of times they would be in a plan room that we could actually go and sit or purchase copies at some of the Reprotech stores or Reprotech reproductive printing stores could actually, we could purchase these plans. Very inexpensive to get. But we would get the project. And how we got the project is that we bid or that we competed with other contractors for a job. Now, we got to have such a good relationship with Creative Structures that a lot of times, they would get their bids, but they were going to find a way to have us work on it. They felt so comfortable with us, and they knew that we were going to get the job done, that they'd say, hey, we've got one, Columbia, South Carolina. Is it going to be, roughly, average the same price? And they really were. It was the same number of plant materials, same number of trees, of maple trees, same number of crepe myrtles. So it was pretty much the same, around the same cost. And, we developed that good working relationship that a lot of times we could send them an invoice. But to begin with, before we first got started working with them, we'd have to bid or, submit our prices, and they would let us know whether or not we got the job. And who were we working for? We were working for a general contractor who is often called the prime contractor. A lot of times we're working for homeowners. They are the owner of the project. But we've also worked for the actual owners of a construction project. We're not actually working for the builder. And a lot of times y'all probably do that with new home construction. Builders would have an allowance for landscaping. They build a $500,000 house, and they say, oh, we've only got $1,500 for landscaping. Well, somebody that's buying a $500,000 house is going to want more than $1,500 worth of landscaping. So a lot of times a builder would say, hey, I got $1,500 allowance. Anything above and beyond, you're going to take care of it yourself, Mr. Homeowner. And a lot of times we would get a lot of work that way, just working for, the couple that's just bought the house. So with an invitation to bid, this is exactly how we did all the O'Reilly Auto Parts stores. And I can't remember how, well, the first ones that we did were in Winston-Salem. We did the one on Walltown Street and the one on Renolda Road in Winston-Salem. And like I said, they look great to start with, and then that's the way all pretty much, a lot of stores do. They kind of just let it, go downhill, unless it's in one of these fabulous, business parks or anything like that. But sometimes you can't blame the, if the store manager is based on a percentage. They may only cut the grass, every other week instead of every week. They've turned the irrigation off. They mulch it once every 2 years instead of every year. So it's one of those things. But we did the first two, and then next thing you know, we started getting invitations to bid. Well, I also realized, hey, if I can do this for them, what I'm going to do now is I went through the phone book and I looked up every single general contractor in Winston-Salem, Greensboro, High Point, the surrounding areas, wrote them down. Wrote them down in a little notebook, typed them up, created an Excel sheet that had their name. If I could find a point of contact, I would, but I would have the name of the company, the address, the phone number, and I would create mailers. Well, I typed up this letter that said, hey, dear builder, we would like to be put on your invitation to bid. So, and that's what happened. We started getting invitations to bid, just like this one. Here, an example, the Chase Construction. They were building, doing something with the Charlotte area transit system. Well, to view this project, go to isquarefoot.com. You can see the plans, all the specifications on it, and we could let them know if we are going to bid on it. And if you go back to the previous one here, like with O'Reilly's, we could check yes, we intend to bid, or no, we are not bidding. So we pretty much bid on every single one that came up. Did we get every single one? No. They did like to have another landscaper as a backup. I guess pretty much all of them. This was a huge company, and they might be building 10 stores at a time. They had 3 or 4 superintendents just handling the O'Reilly auto parts when they were going through that spurge of building new stores. So, and there was a couple of the superintendents that really wanted us to do their job. So you get to know that superintendent, you do a good job for the company, you'll get most of the work, but you're not going to get every single one. And really, sometimes you couldn't get everyone. There was times that we would check no. I remember one like in Missouri, one down in Texas. We were like, nah, it's just getting a little too far. We stuck to the southeast. If we could drive to the job and work some that day, we would do it. I mean, even down in Alabama, we drove 8 hours into Alabama, left one morning at like 4 o'clock, got there, a little after lunch. We still, had part of the day to work, and that's how we based it. But if it took us all day to drive and we couldn't work that day, we wouldn't do it. Again, I'm getting carried away talking about O'Reilly's. But before work, we must obtain permits, Insurance, bonding. We're already bonded. We're landscape contractors and irrigation contractors. We've got to have our orders for materials. Basically, your estimate for the job has everything on it for your orders. Oh, I need 10 maples. I need 15 crepe myrtles. I need 50 Nellie Stevens or Dwarf Burford hollies. I need, okay, I'm seeding X amount of square feet, so I need this much seed, this much fertilizer. Oh, they need sod. Okay, we've got 200 yards of sod. Take your estimate and come up with your orders for materials. And then layout of critical dimensions and grades. Know that landscape plan before you get to the job. You should be able to locate stuff. You should be very familiar with the plan. So when you pull the plan out, you're just checking for things such as critical dimensions. If we know the top of curb is a certain grade, we see it on the plan, we can walk to it, we know exactly where it's at. And back to this permit. Guys, this is something that's important, especially when you start working out of town. We have irrigation license. We have a landscape license. We're covered in the state of North Carolina. But what about different municipalities? You may have to have different work permits or a landscape permit. You may have to have a certain business license within that municipality. Now, a lot of this stuff may not be able to happen just like that. You may not be able to drive into Columbia, South Carolina, as I did one time, and go and get the permit. You may have to fill out the application, turn in the work, and they'll like, all right, you can pick up your permit tomorrow. Well, you can't begin that work unless you have that permit. So sometimes it may take an individual driving down the day before the crews get there to make sure all these permits and stuff can be in place. And if you're working with a good superintendent, they're going to be able to help you do that. We used to work with Steve Holder, who was the superintendent for creative structures. A lot of times he could help us out. We're like, Steve, hey, you guys go and get the landscape permit for us. Sometimes it'd be $50, $100, whatever, and we pay him back when we get there. He helped us out, because if he helped us out, it kept things running smooth. We didn't show up and oh, we can't work, we don't have the landscape permit. He was on top of it. And I'd have to give that superintendent, he was on top of it, and he would make sure things like that. He's like, Eric, just give me the $50 when you get here. He'd pay for it out of his personal pocket. He's just like, let's keep this ball rolling. I want this store done. They could do a store in like 45 days and have the certificate of occupancy. So, they were all about getting it done and moving on to the next one. Again, that good working relationship with the construction company. So now we're going to get into like site prep and a little bit. I'm going to kind of go through these, a little quick, because I've been talking quite a bit, and I want to give you guys time enough to do the little 10-question quiz at the end. That way, if I'm ever audited by the board, I can say, yes, sir, Mr. and Miss Smith, they took that test on such and such date, and finished that quiz. That quiz, guys, is basically in case I'm audited to prove to the board that, hey, yes, you did watch this lecture and take that 10 easy question quiz at the end. So, site prep. We're going to protect existing site features. You're going to have an access route. You need to have access to the property. You may have to put down some riprap, some silt fencing, things of that nature to get on to the site. You need to put in some perimeter fencing, section it off. And as landscape contractors, we could be hired to do all this. Check the specs. It may be part of the deal. They may be requiring us to put in the silt fencing. If you don't read the specs, and you're just looking at the landscape plan, you're going to be figuring landscaping. Well, if you go back and you check the specs, well, landscaper to install perimeter silt fencing. You got to check that. I've seen it happen time and time again. Stabilized benchmarks and baselines used to lay out the project. Usually probably the grading contractor, but we may or may not have to do it. Well, definitely if it's coming to protecting plants, if there's a tree, they might want us to put some of that orange fencing around the tree, or put some orange fencing around the existing structures. That's all going to be part of the finished project. Again, that will be on your specifications, guys. All right, demolition or removing existing site elements that are no longer wanted. Hopefully the grading contractor is taking care of that, but it may or may not be with us. The construction documents will outline the items to safeguard and who's to do it. Tree protection area. Again, stay away from the drip line. Make sure the roots are protected. You're going to get people at not as nature friendly as we are, being in the green industry. That's just not going to care. So take pride in protecting these existing trees. I hate cutting down a good tree, but on the other hand, I'll look at it. It gives me an opportunity to make money and plant them another one. So here's just an example of protecting this tree here with silt fencing. And here's a picture I found online. This is actually overseas of what the the contractor went to a large extent to protect this tree and to have it part of the finished project. Site demo: removal of existing site improvements that are not part of the finished project. We're going to get rid of it. Like I said, hopefully the grading contractor, they're impossible to overlook, and unnecessary damage to the site if not properly performed. You could be restoring the damage at your own expense. And let's take an example of this. We're doing a nice landscape job, fully irrigated, fully landscaped, back of a house. We are going to have to take down a tree. Well, what if we have to cross over the driveway to take down this tree? We have to take our skid steer. Well, buy the plywood, put on the concrete driveway to protect it. You don't want to even turn that skid steer on the driveway and get those black marks on that white pavement. You'll be pressure washing it, or if the customer's mean enough, they might demand that you pour them a new concrete driveway. So when we are demoing a site, be careful as not to damage stuff that is going to stay and be a part of the project. Good picture of an excavator demoing it, a little skid steer. These guys are getting ready to have some fun. It reminds me of, I'm also a medic in the Army Reserves, and I'm with an engineer unit right now, horizontal construction. So I get to see all of these cool toys right here. And sad thing is, I know how to do it in the civilian sector, but since I'm trained as an Army medic, our commander, he doesn't like me getting up on the skid steers or the little mini excavators that we have and doing stuff, even though I know how to do it. And a lot of times I have to teach some of the existing engineer guys how to run a skid steer because it's been so long since they've done it. But site work, it's going to include rough grading, erosion protection, and site drainage. Site drainage is a big thing. You can get in a lot of trouble with that. But we're also going to achieve the desired landform. We are going to make sure that we can get water to the exact drainage points that it needs to be, or to the retention ponds. The site work, it definitely follows the site preparation activities. The first thing we do, if we got to remove the existing vegetation, start doing the subgrade grading, all of that's going to, and it has to be completed before anything else. You're going to see the bulldozers before you see the builders. But your site work is broken down into distinct steps to sculpt the site and preserve the resource. They're going to remove the sod, any vegetation cover, and hopefully next they're going to scrape that stockpile or that topsoil and put it in a nice little pile that we can use for our landscape beds and backfilling up against the curb. We want that good topsoil, but most of the time it's removed, and that kind of bothers me that we're doing that. But again, it's people not knowing that does that. Then they're going to go in and they're going to cut and fill subgrade soils below the finished grade. They're going to do site drainage, add their tile and storm sewers, and they're definitely going to have erosion control up at this point. And you may be hired as the landscape contractor to come in and do some erosion control seeding. Again, read the specifications. It may not be a part of the plan. We're figuring, when we get a landscape plan, guys, we're counting trees, we're figuring square footage of sod or seeding for finished seeding. I haven't checked the specs. Landscape contractor responsible for erosion seeding after site work has been done. So always read those specs. A lot of times, guys, you're going to have to ask the builder for a site of the specs, and they're going to sometimes argue with you. Why do you need to see that? Always demand to see it. It might be that thick, but the landscape section may only be that thick. So I need to see the landscape specifications as part of your spec book. Demand to see it. Grading is then stopped for the construction of utilities, structures, and paving. Followed in those 3 steps right after the grading. So, with site utilities and irrigation, our favorite word, irrigate. The subcontractors the following subs are going to come in. You're going to have your water and sewer, or your utilities contractor, who's going to do the sewer and water. Plumber could actually do this on small sites. Gas, they're going to run gas. They're going to run electric over to the building where the building sites are going to be. They may or may not do phone communications, but if it's pretty much like an O'Reilly's, they would at least have the conduit for the phone and communications coming in, and your electrical contractor would do that most of the time. And then they're going to do it for the site lighting, and then with the irrigation conduit. And like I said, we had a good working relationship with one of the grading contractors who would call us. Eric, do you need us to put down your sleeves underneath the driveway entrance? I said, yes, please do it. And pretty much if we had access underneath the entrance and exit, usually there was only 2 on an O'Reilly's auto parts store. If we had it underneath the entrance and underneath the exit, we were fine. We could do all the irrigation work. We may have to run it all the way around the building, but big deal. As long as we could get underneath the driveway, we were good to go. May have to give the guy $100 to do it, or he might say, hey, take me out for a steak dinner when you get down here, and I'll put that conduit in. Probably had the conduit on his truck, and he definitely had the equipment to do it with, and he was able to put that in for us. Again, we weren't stepping on contractors' toes, other subcontractors. We were working together to accomplish the mission and get it done. And a lot of times that's made out to not only help get the job done quicker, but it built that respect and friendship between each other. All right, next we're going to install our retaining walls and our stairs. So construction at this point requires the stable finish grade for our walls. It can be started after the rough grade is established. The utilities need to be installed if the utilities are going to go underneath them. So you can't build a wall and then be like, oh crap, I had to run the sewer line here, or I had to run the water line through here. All that needs to be done first. Utilities got to go in first, then the walls. Then has to be constructed if retains subgrade for paved areas. So a lot of times the way these building lots are, you're just going to have to deal with retaining walls. And some of the places that they build, I remember I ate at a Zaxby's the other night, and I'm like, holy cow. It's kind of built up on a hill, but the way they cut into the hill, the drive-through around the back had a 10-foot retaining wall just barely big enough to get the car through the drive-through. And they had to have that wall there to hold back the subgrade because the exit went up and around the drive-through. So they had to have those walls. And they have to do this because the lots are so small. They can't grade it and make it work, so they have to add these walls. Pretty picture of retaining wall. I'm having some slides in here, guys, that I show my students at the school I teach at. So just showing them exactly different types of retaining walls. This is more, this is holding back subgrade, but a little more decorative than we would see on a commercial site. Landscape paving, it begins when rough grading, the utilities, and landscape walls supporting the paved areas are in place and the heavy construction traffic has stopped. Now, I'm talking about not only with the landscape paving, I'm talking about concrete, brick pavers, concrete pavers, slate walks, any of that nature. You want to make sure that no heavy construction is going to be crossing them. You don't want to lay down your brick pavers sidewalk or your slate walk and then have to drive a skid steer over it to install a water feature, or to do you don't want a truck to have to drive over it to deliver lumber to build a deck onto the house. All that needs to be completed before you do your landscape paving. And you can start it if the road base is down or the rough layer of paving is down. So it's some leeway there, and it just depends on where you're going. Our sites, we wanted to make sure pretty much everything was done before we started laying a brick paver patio or even a 4-inch pour sidewalk. Don't want to take the chance of any type of equipment having to run over something new. Not only for damaging it, but for aesthetics. A skid steer driving over a brand new sidewalk, if it don't crack it, you're going to get black scuff marks from the tires or the tracks. So wait till the last thing to do it. The landscape paving will include concrete paving, brick and concrete pavers, stone, granular paving for walks, and then even your drives and your patios. And all of our students here at the school, we do a retaining wall and a brick type paver patio or concrete paver for our landscape construction class. Students love doing that. It's fun to get outside and not have to listen to lectures, as you're probably thinking right now. So paving edges are used for the elevation guidelines. I always think about this as the curb. You always see curb and gutter poured on the O'Reillys. A lot of times they would, and I've seen it done different ways. I've seen it a couple different ways. Because if the job was close enough, especially the two that got us started doing them, drive by and see what's going on. You would see just the pad, the building pad poured, and they're putting up the building. Electricians are inside, plumbers inside, and they hadn't poured the actual parking lot. And I've also seen it where they've poured the building pad and they've poured the parking lot, and they haven't even started the building. It's just a building pad and concrete. Then they would call us in and we'd show up. Whoa, the building's not even up. And that's okay. As long as the pavement and stuff was done, and they were pouring 12, 15 inches in a parking lot, and they could get the trucks in. They could back in that tractor trailer that had the building beams on it and stuff of that nature. So I've seen it done different ways. But curb and gutter, a lot of the times, O'Reilly's, they would concrete everything if they owned the property. If they leased it, that's about the only time you would see them use asphalt for the paving. And if they're using asphalt, and think of any construction project where you actually just see the curb and the gutter, that can be used for an elevation guideline. The curb is following that grading plan, top of curb. Many times you've seen TC on the plan, top of curve needs to be a spot elevation. So good stuff there. So next we'll move into site structures and wood construction. And typically, now what we just talked about, make sure pavement's done, stuff like that. If I'm doing this job right here, and you'll see it from the notes. Well, a lot of times if we do a concrete paver patio like this, we may pour a slab underneath it, and that's my way to do it. I'd rather pour a pad and lay my pavers on top of it. Now, am I going to be the one pouring the concrete? No. I'm going to hire the subcontractor who's going to pour the slab for me, and then I can lay the brick. But I'm also, if I'm building a big enough pergola or shade structure that needs type of footers, by the time he does this, I'm going to have him pour it for that. And this framing package right here could, basically be toted back here. I mean, it's some lattice work and some posts, and you had enough help, you could tote it in the back, and you could cross over that patio if you had to. But if this was a big, tight, screened in area or anything like that, and you had to cross over this, you might want to build this first. But with the pad, if you're building a pad under it and you're building footers for that, that could be done at the same time. Put up your wood structure and then lay your brick. So with this, the site structures, they can be built anytime to the landscape use. Subgrade establishment allows for the foundations and slabs for freestanding structures to be poured and built. And then structures requiring the utility site or site walkways could allow pouring of slabs between utility construction and landscape paving. Again, that can get kind of confusing. What I'm going to do, I'm going to probably attach these slides for you guys to print out or better yet, screenshot it. I always did that when I was in school, especially grad school. You'd be looking at a lecture online. I had this little program called Snagit that would actually screen capture each slide that I looked at, and I would save it in a file, and I'd have my own PowerPoint. I know the way this can kind of get just a tad bit confusing, but the preferred method is to pour the footings at the same time that the landscape paving activities are underway and to finish the structures after paving and buildings are in place. That's basically what I just said with that picture right there. And let's just go back to it. If I'm going to have a sub base here, or let's just say if it was all concrete and I needed to pour footers here, I would do it at the same time. But even with this being a concrete paver, I like having that concrete pad underneath it. That way I get the slope right and I get the water running off right. I would pour the footers if this, pergola or arbor or any type of wood structure that needed footers, I would pour it at the same time as I'm pouring my concrete. As long as I don't have to have any of these heavy delivery trucks drive over what I just paved. Okay. Construction of the site structures not connected to a building can be started after all utility work is completed, but the finished work in connection to the building may have to be delayed. This is like a freestanding structure. You can start it after all the utility work is complete, but you're not having to worry about connect it to the building. Or if you do, you may have to delay it at that point. Structures attached to the buildings will need to have exterior work underway before starting. And examples would be screen porches and decks. And the delivery trucks, again, will need access to these structures for materials. I'm trying to think, is there anything else to talk about here? Yeah. So basically, you'd want them to have their exterior work, either the brick facade or the vinyl siding would need to be underway and near completion, so you could actually, build that deck on or attach it to the brickwork. Finish grading and completion of irrigation work. Yes, they finally got to us. They've called you at 5 o'clock the night before and said, we're ready for you. The next morning, you need to be here at 8 o'clock. And boom, we are there. So, hardscapes are completed. Prior to turf installation and plantings, topsoil spread back over the areas of turf and planting. Install the valves after the fine grading. Install sprinkler heads after the turf installation. The funniest pipe should be sticking up. And guys, I've done it both ways. I've put the heads back after we've sowed the yard or put the sod down. But pretty much if you're putting down sod, you want to make sure you can turn water on right away. As long as you're done the same day, you're going to be fine. But a lot of times we have just seen the funny pipe sticking up out of the ground, and you're going back installing the sprinkler heads, the last thing. But again, make sure hardscapes are finished. Arrange for temporary water immediately after sod installation, or wait for the sprinkler head installation for seeded areas. Make sure you get that sod wet. Install all lateral mainline valves prior to the fine grading. Duh. And then the valve boxes should be left loose on top of the valves for protection. All information that you guys are very familiar with. Fencing and freestanding walls. Timing is going to vary from project to project. Of course, footings should be poured with other footings. Use a surveyor. If a surveyor is going to be used to pour the footers, have them do your landscape stuff too. That way there's no issues of being off on the project. I've seen it happen. If a surveyor messes up and you build it and it's based on the surveyor, he's going to be the one paying for it to get done. But if you're marking your footers and coming back, setting your nails where the brick's going to go, if it's a wall or anything like that, and you mess up and you're off, it depends on what kind of homeowner you got, or if the architect's out there measuring it, and you end up being you know, a couple inches off and you've got to tear it down and redo it, use that surveyor. It doesn't cost that much money to have them mark your footers and come back and pin it for you. Posts requiring the concrete should be installed when pouring sidewalks. Just like that slide we were talking about, the patio and that harbor. The surfacing should not wait. Surfacing should wait until all deliveries are made. No more construction vehicles. Lay that brick paver patio after all delivery trucks. Site amenities: benches, flagpoles, etc. This is when it's going to be installed. They're delayed installation just before or after plant installation. Make sure the footers and utilities are addressed in the utility and pouring stages, especially if you've got a spotlight on your flagpole, or you've got some landscape lighting that's going to be around the benches or whatever. Make sure the footings and utilities are poured. Just talked about that. Water features need to be installed and operational prior to the plantings to avoid any disturbance to the plants after installation. And again, I know you guys have probably done it a different way. So have I. This is pretty much just the landscape process on how it should be done, but a lot of times we have to do it a different way to get it done. Know what I'm saying? And then plant material and turf. It's the last thing we do on a construction site. It begins with the larger trees and plants in areas that are difficult to access. Smaller trees and shrubs are then installed. Ground covers and annuals are the last to be planted, and then mulching and turf are the very last items to be installed on the site. Some contractors are seeding first, then planting, and then repairing damage to the turf. Well, you definitely wouldn't want to do that with sod, but I can see why they may want to do this with seeding. You can get that turf grass up. If you got a chance, hey, can't get the plant material in today, but if we sow the yard, it's going to be raining the next couple of days. You get that yard sowed in, it's going to prevent erosion of the yard, and plus you're getting your seed down prior to a rain that'll help germinate it, shortly thereafter, and then you can come back and plant. And if it's a small job and you can tote the plants up there, that's fine. I just hate driving skid steers and tractors over something that's already been done. Shaking the straw. All right, cleanup should happen after completion of landscape installation. Some builders require landscaping be complete before some exteriors and corrective work can be finished. Verify all that exterior work is complete before applying the final aesthetic treatments. And I did a nice landscape design for a big high roller in Winston one time. They'd put in a pool, and they wanted the pool to be screened immediately. I don't understand why. I mean, the houses, there's huge lots, and there was good deal of space in between the houses, but for some reason they wanted their new pool to be 100% screened. So we were buying, huge Nellie Stevens, huge wax myrtles, just larger plant material to go in. It was a nice landscape job for us, and we had planted some wax myrtles that were tree formed up around the actual pool, and then had the Nellies and a bunch of crepe myrtles and stuff away from the pool that did the actual screening. Well, we planted our wax myrtles and some autoleucans and gardenias and stuff around the pool, and they hadn't finished the exterior work of the concrete. To me, it looked 100% done. They did a stamped concrete around the pool, and we planted the plants, mulched and everything. Then they had a guy come and seal the stamped concrete, and he used a cleaner, like an acid-based cleaner, to wash it off and then sealed it. Well, that acid wash killed all the wax myrtles, killed all the other plant materials that were around it. Homeowner calls us just screaming, "Wow, what's wrong? You sold me a bunch of crap." And I went and I looked at it, and I'm like, you just had your patio. It looks little bit shinier than it did last time. Yeah, we had it, you know, they acid washed it, and then they, you know, put a clear coat on it and all this. I'm like, there's your problem. I took a soil sample and had it tested. Yeah, sure enough, all that acid got into the soil, and boom. Guess who paid for the reinstallation of those nice, tall, tree-formed wax myrtles? Wasn't us. It was the concrete guy. Warranty. Usually a 1 year or one growing season. We always did it for one growing season for our residential. Again, with the O'Reillys, as soon as the store owner took over, we really didn't have a responsibility. But that's going to be determined by the owner and the contractor, and that's what O'Reilly had, Creative Structures had worked out with the auto parts store. Construction scheduling. All right. We'll kind of go through this a little fast. I know I wanted to make sure this lasted an hour and give you a few minutes to do this question. But individual projects, performing the work in sequence from start to finish, with a start date and anticipated completion date, usually less than 2 weeks. You know, our project, usually one phase with one step being completed before the next. One starts, small crew. That's what we're talking about with individual projects. Now, formal scheduling. With these small individual projects, there not going to be any type of charting or calendars brought in, but with formal scheduling, this is going to be an integration of schedules for proposed and existing projects. They're going to use charting and logical graphing for this. And here would be an example of a bar chart or a Gantt chart. Some of you guys may be familiar with probably like Microsoft projects, where you can do the scheduling out like that, and have other people invite other people to see the schedule. I know when we work for some of the larger track builders, Dad still does a lot of irrigation for the track builders, especially if they're building like a nice model home. We'll do a nice irrigation job, a nice planting for it. And in the neighborhood, they're having other jobs going on. Well, what you can do is actually log into a website that these builders have, and it's going to tell you the date that the permit was pulled, and it's going to have the whole job scheduled out. So based on permit date, it's going to tell you if it's, you know, today's November 23rd, if a permit was pulled, well, probably January 10th, as fast as they build these houses, they might have us start the irrigation and landscape. But it's all based on that. And a buddy of mine's a framer, does a lot of framing for the same crew. Like from the day the permit's built or pulled, when concrete's done 5 days later, he's there on like day 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. He has like 5 days to frame the house and be 100% done. He never really even talks to the superintendent. It's all based on emails and logging into this website that he knows where he's going to be working. So I'm not going to get into this much. This is just breaking down the Barr charts and the Gantt charts. Something I briefly introduced to my students in class, but we don't really go over it too much in detail. Each builder has like their own specific software programs that they're using. It does help the contractors plan by ordering supplies, hiring subcontractors. You can actually see where you're at in the schedule and when you're going to be there. Think of anything else I need to tell you about with that. Probably not, but logical network scheduling, it's interconnected activities, numerous simultaneous tasks, and probably not so much with us because, guys, we really are kind of the last ones in on the project. But like when you see heat and air and plumbing and electrical, some of those guys, you know, their days might be crossing over each other. They've got it planned so detailed and can build these projects so quickly based on these guys showing up working at the same time. There is a critical path method or critical path analysis. It's all flow charted and identifies each activity in the construction process in a sequence. Virtual design and construction, building information modeling is the newest, coolest thing out there. Been introduced to it briefly. My undergraduate program, alma mater, they're actually teaching this in the landscape architecture program now. I was born just a little bit too early to go through that, but that's something to really see in place, based on, if you had a rainy day. I mean, the whole thing changing. I mean, it encompasses everything, guys. Not only weather, but if you moved a wall in a building, how much that would delay everybody else, and you can see it, on the schedule now by the homeowner making the change, moving that wall. Where does it put everybody else in? So it's really cool to see that. You can make changes and see the consequences. You can see the 3D model based on changes or the new design. You can prepare the estimate, track the changes and their impact on material order schedules and project cost, and can produce a better quality work on tighter schedules, often with smaller budgets. And this is where your construction manager is going to come in. This is going to help with that. And guys, I see landscape architecture firms doing construction management services for their side of the house, and I just really see in the near future probably going away from more bidding or the different types. And there's another lecture. You may watch that if you need additional hours on the types of construction management types of firms that are out there. And talking to the builders now, a lot of them are moving in that direction anyway, doing cost plus and actually managing the job instead of trying to build it as cheap as possible and as quickly as possible. Example, virtual design. Some of you guys may or may not be familiar with Pro Landscape. We teach that here at the college. Additional scheduling methods, program evaluation and review technique, or PERT, combined with the CPM, can identify optimistic, pessimistic, and most likely completion dates. Takes into account how many rainy days, how many snow days, if it started in the winter. Good stuff here. Used for larger projects that are easily influenced by nature or human factors. Integrating the schedules, it's a mastermind of multiple projects to keep the business going, keep crews busy with no dead time, keep looking for jobs and maintain the ones that you have. So if you're part of this, software or, working for a builder that lets you integrate their schedules, you can see their projects coming up. You can see, well, hey, I've got a couple weeks in the month of May that, I can actually do something else, or I need to find some work for those guys because, June, July is going to be booked working for this, this builder. Keeps you looking into the future. You don't want any downtime for your guys. And voila, we have completed the landscape construction process. And if you have any questions, my name is Eric Jones. Feel free to send me an email. Thanks, guys, and I'll see you in the next lecture.